Today, my guests, Duwayne and Helen Yantes, are talking to me from their home in the great state of South Dakota, the Mount Rushmore state. It seems like a long way from Warner Robins, Georgia to Somerset, South Dakota, but as you're about to see, the distance is not far at all. I will let them tell you exactly how old they are, but you won't believe it when you hear it. I will tell you they've been married for 67 years, and they not only still love each other after all those years, but they actually like each other, which should make us all smile. I should also tell you that this couple produced good fruit, which is not surprising at all. A good tree bears good fruit. If you total the number of their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren, the number today would be 76 and counting. In other words, they know a little about marriage and raising children. If you're married and trying to figure out how to make it last or even make it better, this podcast is for you. If you're attempting to raise children in this crazy world and are struggling in the process, you should listen to these folks who know what they're talking about and have the receipts to back it up. I created this podcast to give normal people like Duwayne and Helen a voice to inspire people by simply telling their stories. There's much wisdom and much inspiration in this story, that is for sure. But I also created it to record voices for family members to hear now, but also to hear in the future after my guests and I are long gone. Their voices and their message will one day be priceless to all those they leave behind. You will notice this couple had humble beginnings. Duwayne was literally born and raised in a bar, for goodness sake, next to a gas station where his dad worked. When they got married, they knew money was something they needed in life, but it was never their pursuit. You will see that Duwayne worked many jobs throughout his life to provide for his family, while his wife stayed back and raised their 6 children in whatever town or state they happened to live in. Duwayne's eventual career in the business world was never his identity or their focus. Their career was simply their marriage and their family. One thing is for certain, Duwayne and Helen Yantes had one stellar career.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
This is Bruce Goddard, and you're listening to the View from a Hearse podcast. As I mentioned, I've got some special friends. I hadn't known them long, but they're all the way from South Dakota. And, you know, you got a Georgia guy and South Dakota folks. We probably need an interpreter, but I think we'll be good. My guests are Duwayne and Helen Yantes from Somerset, South Dakota. Thank you guys for being on this call. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's nice to be here with you. We appreciate you giving us the time to tell a story, which is hopefully will be interesting to your listeners.
Yeah, hi, Bruce. Good morning. We're sitting here in our kitchen looking at the sunshine and,
Wonderful.
Thinking about the Georgia flowers.
I just met them a couple of weeks ago, this couple, and they're not young physically, but they're very young at heart. And they were actually the father and mother of our dear neighbors here in Warner Robins, Georgia, and they were in our home. And we had dinner, and I started talking to them and realized how interesting they were. Duwayne, I'm going to start with you. I just want to first let people know what you do now. You're both obviously retired, but just talk about your life right now.
Well, right now we have a very good life. We try to live our life according to the scriptures, and we try to serve others. In our retirement, we have worked with CASA, which is a court-appointed special advocate for children in need. We've worked with hospice, which is helping people at the end of their lives.
Right.
We did Meals on Wheels. We did several things that we hoped would be of service to other people.
You spend a lot of time volunteering, right?
Yes, that's right. After we retired, because we retired fairly early, we made sure that we stayed busy with church activities and anything else. I was in the Knights of Columbus for several years. I was the head of the Knights for 3 years. So.
Wow. You mentioned the Knights of Columbus. You guys are good Catholics. You're very devoted church members, right?
Born and raised Catholics our whole life, Bruce.
Yeah. So that's Helen. And Helen just chimed in. Helen, did he miss anything about your life now?
Well, we live in such a wonderful neighborhood, and we've got such dear neighbors, good friends, wonderful friends in our church. So, we have breakfast with them in the mornings. And one thing that Duwayne and I like to do, and we probably shouldn't tell anybody this, but I'll sneak it in there. We go up to Deadwood and we gamble a little bit. Is that permissible? And then I read. My favorite pastime is I read lots of books.
Right. Reading and gambling, right? I love it. That's great. That is great. So talk about growing up and a little bit of where you came from and the importance of the roots that you have in your life.
I'll start with the beginning. I have a very auspicious beginning. Back in the time when the Depression was on, 1935 is quite a while ago, and my parents at that time had a filling station. It wasn't theirs. They were just working there. And as you know, there weren't many cars. So they ended up losing that. But there was a bar connected with that filling station. And there was a bedroom in back of it. And that's where we lived. And that's where I was born. I was born in a bar. So,
that's amazing.
So anyway, my dad worked. That job went away. He worked on several jobs in the next few years and ended up working for the WPA, which paid him $1 a day, which was more than he could make any other way. And when I was 6 years old, I was born in Big Lake, Minnesota. And when I was 6 years old, we moved to Delano, Minnesota. And that's where I went to school, had all my friends. All our family and relatives lived in Delano. So I had a hard time being bad when I was growing up because everybody knew me.
Right.
And
I had that same issue.
My parents knew what I did before I got home.
How did you and Helen meet?
After high school, I went into the Marine Corps. When I was in junior year in high school, I joined Marine Corps Reserves. And after I got out of high school, I went to active duty. And when I came home in 1955, I was discharged. I went to a dance. And I was sitting at the bar with a friend of mine. And these two beautiful girls walked in. And I said, Jim, there's the gals we're going to take home tonight. So we waited till intermission. We went up and introduced ourselves. And the rest is history.
How about your side of that, Helen? What do you remember about that night?
Yeah, there's just a little bit of a twist to that.
I figured there would be. Yeah.
I was with a group of friends, and Penny, a girlfriend, and I were out on the floor dancing. And Duwayne and Jim came up to us and asked us to dance. And I thought to myself, well, he's pretty handsome. I think I'll take a chance. So we danced and talked and visited, and then Duwayne offered me a ride home, but my friends decided that they would protect me, so they followed us home and made sure he got me home safe.
So
And
they were looking after you, right?
he was a true gentleman, and so that was the start of our dating. And then we were married a year and a half later.
So what year was that you met?
1957.
1957. You know how old I was in 1957? 3.
Bruce, when we got married, I was working for the Delano Granite Works, which was the only industry in Delano after I got out of the service. And when we got married, I was making $1.80 an hour. I was probably 80 cents higher than a lot of the people. And we never had any bills. We paid our car payment and our rent and survived on that. Because what I told my wife when we got married, that she would never have to work. I would do whatever it took to support our family.
So that was quite a commitment, and you don't hear that commitment in this day and time, do you?
I have to tell you a little story about our honeymoon, Bruce.
Okay.
Duwayne and I went to Canada for our honeymoon, and we came home, and Delano sits on the Crow River, and it had flooded. So we had to park our car away from our apartment in a 2-story house and get some groceries. And so we bought some groceries, and we had to walk back to the house and wade through the water to get to our door. And Duwayne decided that he would carry me and the groceries at the same time. So halfway to our house, he proceeded to slip and drop me in the water along with the groceries. My neighbor George comes running out there, and he wants to help us. And I thought, my dear husband tried to be a brave guy, and it ended up to be kind of a funny story. So, that was the beginning of our marriage.
So y'all got started with a bang, right?
That's right.
That's right. So, Duwayne, I also know, talking to you the other night, you were quite an athlete growing up.
I was always interested in sports. And in our day, we didn't have all this electronic gear to keep us out of the house, So we played outside at all times that we could. And
I grew up in the same environment. That's changed, hasn't it?
Yes, it has changed. And I don't think a lot of it hasn't changed for the better. I guess when you see people running around holding their iPhones in their hand about 24/7, it's a different world.
For sure.
They don't even have time to talk to their kids because they're watching and doing something on their iPad.
Right.
Anyway, I was interested in sports, so the only thing I could play, basketball, baseball, and football, because it didn't cost my parents anything. They didn't have any money to support anything else. And I did that all through high school. I did it all through the Marine Corps. I played town baseball until I was 24. And then we moved from Delano to Rochester, Minnesota. And a few years later, we moved to Winona, Minnesota. So anyway, I was always active in sports. I played racquetball when it came up. I played handball. I played tennis. I did about everything. I didn't start golf till I was in my 30s, but I was a bowler. I was over a 200 average bowler. Just about anything in sports. I played basketball and softball and all those till I was 52. And then my job took a turn and I went on the road. So I couldn't do that anymore.
Right.
So instead of that, I started running, and I ran till I retired.
Unbelievable. How about you, Helen?
Well, I was born and raised in Minnesota, And my dad always had a grocery store and meat market.
Wow, that sounds familiar.
That was kind of the growing up years working in the store. And when my brother Tom and I were young, my dad had us going out and peddling advertisements for the store.
That's exactly what we did growing up in the store, running those what we call circulars, the advertisements you'd take around for what was on sale. Yeah.
Well, I feel really bad, and I'm guilty to this day because my brother Tom and I ended up throwing a lot of the advertising bills in the creek because we decided we didn't want to do this anymore.
So let me tell you a story right there. We used to deliver them, and then we were in school. Daddy hired somebody to do it, and this was my first witness of somebody getting fired. This guy was delivering what we call circulars. They were advertisements for grocery advertisements. And Daddy followed him and realized that he was throwing them in the ditch instead of delivering them, and he fired him on the spot. And I was with him, and I couldn't believe that guy had been fired. So I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. So you would have got fired if you had been working for Daddy.
Oh, I tell you, I think I probably was around 5 years old, and my brother was 7. And then anytime a big dog would come up the street, he'd put me in front of him so to protect him. But anyway.
Let me ask you a question. Growing up working in the grocery store and the meat market, do you know how to cut up a chicken?
Oh, heavens, no.
You don't?
However, I do have a chicken story. When we lived in Minneapolis, my dad used to butcher chickens in the backyard. And I was watching, and he cut the head off of a chicken, and you know how they start running around?
Yeah.
Well, every place I ran, the chicken ran. So he was chasing me. I'll never forget that one. Well, we moved out to Deep Haven, Minnesota on Lake Minnetonka, and my dad bought another store. So that's where I was until Duwayne and I were married.
Wow. I want you to talk about what it has been like being married to Duwayne.
Well, Duwayne is an honorable, good man, and we've had a solid life together, and I look back at how many blessings I can see over the years. I never had to worry about him. He was always faithful. He always did whatever he could do to support the family, but I have to correct him on one thing when he said I never had to work outside the home, because I had 5 children in 6 years. And so, my work was at home, and my career has always been my family. Then we had our 6th baby and moved to California. So our life together has been pretty solid, Bruce. Can't complain about this guy.
Well,
he's pretty faithful.
You have been fortunate. And Duwayne, before you talk about your marriage to Helen, I want to go back and let's talk about your career, because I know you had a great career. You traveled all over everywhere, found yourself in Georgia for several years. So just talk about that a little bit.
Well, what happened, I was, when I was in Winona, Minnesota, I was fortunate to get a job with a company that supplied composite materials, plastics to the commercial industry and to the aerospace industry. And what I did, I was inside sales at that time for the commercial side.
Right.
Well, it ended up, they bought a company out in Orange, California, and the manager they sent, a friend of mine and myself, they sent out to operate this new company. That's how we got to California. So this was in 1963. And we stayed there until 1970 when we had our 6th kid. Then we decided we didn't want to raise our kids in California. So we were looking at Idaho, and I was trying to find a job, but I couldn't find anything that would support my family. But we decided to move. I met a guy who hired me. He had a case implement company. He sold tractors and logging equipment in Idaho. So we packed up our kids. I drove the car or the truck full of furniture, and Helen was in the car with 6 kids.
Oh, my goodness.
We We were on Highway 12 along the Columbia River, and we ran into a terrible snowstorm.
Oh, my goodness.
And we ended up with about 8 inches of snow. And we were fortunate enough, we finally found a hotel. But Helen drove through that snow for probably a couple of hours.
How far was that trip?
Oh, let's see. We were probably about 700 to 800 miles.
Wow.
Anyway, I worked there for 6 months, and I found a franchise that was an employment agency out of Spokane, Washington.
Right.
And we decided to do that. So then we had to have a place to put it. So I went to Rapid City and checked out the community. And I remember calling Helen and I said, this town is either going to die or it's going to boom. So we took a chance. So in 6 months, we loaded up our kids again and drove to Rapid City, South Dakota.
So you guys have been married, what, 65 years, 66 years? How long have you been married?
67 years.
67 years. And you know what's amazing is the experiences you have. There's no way to capture all that. I mean, you think about all the stuff you've been through. I want to talk about these kids and grandkids in a minute, but I want to talk about what is the key to being happily married for 67 years.
I would say we have been walking with the Lord the whole time. We put our faith in God, and I've never worried about anything. If I didn't have a job, I wasn't worried. I knew I was going to come up with another one. I had faith in the Lord, and He was always there for us. He always took care of us, no matter what.
Wow. Isn't that the truth? Wow. How about you, Helen? What's your key to being married to this one man all these years?
You know, Bruce, I never thought I would be married to anybody else, really. I think when you're committed to a relationship, you take the good times and the bad times in stride. You work through everything. And we've had so many blessings over the years that they far outweigh any difficulties. And our marriage has been our career alongside the good Lord. I have to tell you one story. When we moved to Rapid City with our kids, we were staying in a motel. And we went to church on Sunday morning. In Rapid City, there are 5 churches, Catholic churches. And we're going up to Holy Communion, and I look across the aisle, and here's Duwayne's mother and dad, who drove all the way from Delano, 500 miles, not knowing where we were. And there we are in the same church at the same time going up to the communion together.
Wow.
I mean, talk about the Lord's blessing. Well, then they ended up taking 2 of our kids home with them to Delano. Well, we got settled. And we moved into Rapid City a year before this terrible, terrible flood in 72 that killed 235 people. It was a terrible nightmare. Mm-hmm. But we ended up buying a home in Rapid City right before that flood. So we were fortunate in that way that we were not in any dangerous path. But we've had quite a few adventures like that.
Oh, I'm sure. So the thing I'm wondering about, because you said in a marriage you've obviously been blessed. You guys were very fortunate. You married somebody not only that you loved but you liked. And I love the quote, your marriage has been your career. That's really true. That has been your main career. But I know there are people listening to this that's been married a few years and figuring out how to do this. You mentioned that there are good times and bad times, and I know that it hadn't all been roses, although now you look back, it's been a wonderful time. I know there's been difficult times along the way, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I think one of the things most men and women have a problem with is communication and not really sharing their feelings about things.
Right.
So we end up assuming a lot of stuff we shouldn't assume. But Duwayne and I have always worked through everything together. And wherever he had a job, that's where we went. And I went with him. I thought, wherever he goes, I go.
Right.
And that's just the way it's been.
Well, Duwayne, I think you've been very fortunate, my friend, to have a wife like that.
And we know it. I started my business in Rapid City, and everything went well. We didn't have a lot of money when we started. We had to take and refinance our car to buy a house, but we made it from there. And while I was in Rapid, I was very busy with a lot of activities. I was on the board of directors for the Black Hills Federal Credit Union. I was on the board of directors for the Black Hills Credit Bureau. And I was also on the city council right after the flood.
Wow.
So I was also in Civitan, which I also led for a while. So we kept busy. We kept the kids busy. One thing about the kids, they all turned out to be good workers.
Isn't that amazing? I think there's a reason for that. So let's talk about your kids. You've got 6 kids. I know one of them well that lives 2 doors down from me in Georgia. But you also have, I forgot how many grandkids you said you had. Let's talk about your family, and let's first talk about your kids and how'd you raise them? How did they turn out the way they did? People want to hear that. I can promise you that's got little kids. What did you do?
Well, the one thing that we made sure that we did, we took our little kids to church every single solitary Sunday. We made sure that they were well fed, roof over their head. We played games. I made tents for the kids in the living room when they were little kids. They were involved in some sports, went to Catholic high schools. Then I made a photo album for the children from the time they were born until they were married, and gave each of them a photo album of their life when they got married. And I have to say, without bragging, they're all caregivers, they're all hard workers, and they're all very sensitive people about helping others. So I can't say anything about them other than they're good friends with each other. And one thing we've always taught them to do is to love and respect each other. And if we want to criticize, you look in the mirror.
That's great advice. Great advice.
And now we have 21 grandchildren and 46 great-grandchildren and 3 great-great-grandchildren.
21 grandchildren, 46 great-grandchildren, and how many great-great-grandchildren? 3 great-great.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
And we have one more great-grandchild on the way that's due in June.
So one of the things you just said, Helen, it caught my attention is all your kids are friends and they get along. And in this world, there's a lot of siblings that don't speak to one another. So just talk about, I know that's important. When you see that has to make you smile. It actually make you feel good.
Well, it really does. In fact, my son's 66th birthday is today, and we're having them up tomorrow for a birthday party. And the kids get together, the ones that are here. And I miss my darling Victoria, who's your neighbor. Yep. And we have another daughter in Idaho and a daughter in Indiana. So unfortunately, we don't get to see them as often, but they are each other's good friends. And it's a wonderful thing because, like you said, some kids don't even talk to each other, and I find that really sad. So we're big on forgiveness and loving each other. If you don't show love, you can't grow love, right?
That's true, isn't it? And big on forgiveness.
That's right. That's right.
I'm not going to ask Duwayne this question, but I'm going to ask because I know he couldn't answer it. Are you able to name all your grandchildren and great-grandchildren? Can you spill them out?
Well, I'll tell you what. Helen has them all listed on the calendar, and she never misses a birthday.
Isn't that amazing?
She never misses an anniversary. So we have to work very hard just to pay for all the money she puts in those cards.
I can't imagine. We've got 9 grandchildren. We have 9, and I never can remember on the 9's birthday. We've got them written down. I have to look to see when the birthday is, but they come often with that many. You need a part-time job just to send the birthday cards or whatever you do with all them. Unbelievable.
She goes to General Dollar
love
every
it.
first of the month and comes out with a whole pack of cards for birthdays or anniversaries, whatever it is.
It's amazing. And I know you're glad that she's looking after that, right?
That's right.
And not you, right? So you mentioned raising the kids in the church. Why was that important?
I'll tell you a little story that my parents had 4 kids. In 1943, they took my dad into the service. So my mother was home with the 4 of us, and she had to sell her car. We had no car because she couldn't afford to keep it when Dad was in the service. And when my dad came out of the service, he went into the trucking industry with the granite works. So he was never home a lot. My mother did most of the raising, and she made sure we went to a Catholic school from the 1st grade through the 8th grade. And then we had to go to the public school. I spent 2 years in the seminary after the 8th grade, so I only spent 2 years in public school. But they always made sure that we were in church. And of course, being in the Catholic Church, we had Mass every morning when I was going to school. So the nuns had a great impact on my life.
Wow.
And I think they did on all my brothers the same way.
Wow.
One of my brothers had rheumatic fever when he was about 8 years old, and he was left with an enlarged heart. And when he was 19 years old, they couldn't wait anymore, and he had to have open heart surgery, but he didn't come out of that. So I lost a 19-year-old. And at that time...
Was he older or younger than you?
I'm the oldest.
Okay.
I'm the oldest of 5 boys.
Okay.
My mother was pregnant with my wife and my brother's wife at the same time after my brother died. So I have a younger brother that he's the uncle of my oldest son, and my oldest son is older than his uncle.
So let's go back and say that again. You said your mother was pregnant with your brother's wife. So let's
Yeah.
I don't think you meant that, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to envision that, and I can't quite
Maybe
get
you
my
better edit that out. No, they were all pregnant together anyway.
Yeah, I got it.
At the same time, and consequently, I have a younger brother that I was gone, and I know him pretty well, but he's the only one left besides me. I lost my other brothers with cancer in 2 weeks apart. So,
How old are you, Duwayne?
right now I'm 89.
89. And how old are you, Helen?
Do I have to tell?
No, but I would like to know because I want to make a point with it.
I'm going to be 85 in October.
89 and 84, basically. You'll be 85 in October. I want to make a point of that. But before I do that, Helen, I want you to add to this thing because you mentioned raising your kids in the church. How important was that to you, and why was it important to you? Obviously, for Duwayne, grew up that way. He grew up in the church. He saw the power of the church. He saw the power of the nuns that greatly impacted his life. How about you?
Pretty much the same thing, Bruce. My mother and dad were Catholic, brought us to church every Sunday. And that was important. That's just an important part of our life. And I don't think you realize it until you're older. You know, as you're young and you're a teenager and growing up, you just kind of do your own thing. But in the back of your mind, it's always to do what you think is right. Right. And that was the important thing. So my career has been my family. I've never really wanted a career outside the home. Was involved in a lot of things. I taught religious education for the Cathedral of Rapid City. And I was pastoral ministry in Peachtree City when we lived there for 12 years. So I was involved in a lot of different things. I did work for Herberger's department store later on, and that was a fun job for me. But I don't have any complaints about anything. I never had a desire to work outside the home. And when I look at society, Bruce, you know, the family is the foundation of a healthy society.
For sure.
And I think we're losing that.
Right.
So I have no regrets, dear. No regrets.
Well, you should not have any regrets. When you were raising your kids and you raised them in the church, there are people listening to this that I'm sure are raising kids and they're wondering, am I doing it right, or what should I do? What was your goal for your kids in raising them? If you could say one thing, what was your goal in raising your kids?
I think that what I said before is to raise them to be kind to one another, to be friends with one another, to serve their community. And I think all of the kids are pretty good at caregiving. And I don't know anything more important than that. You know, you can talk about kids having careers outside the home, but I think their career has been family as well. So maybe Duwayne can add something to that.
Well, the main thing, we wanted them to know who God was in their life and to be able to depend on Him for all things. And I think for the most part, they do that.
In addition to raise them to know God and to love God, but you wanted them to like each other. And I know when you got 6 kids, I know there were fights and fusses along the way. How did you, with your goal to get them to get along, I'm sure that there's some wisdom you can share there.
Well, I might be at fault here, Bruce, because I tried to do everything by showing good example of the way I live my life. And I know Helen did the same thing. The only thing, I wasn't a good communicator with the kids. I tried to show them what to do, and they knew how I lived my life, but I wish I would have been a better communicator with them.
Well, I'm sure that they would think that your communication by living your life was very clear. I'm sure of that. Helen, what can you add to that?
You can look back in your life and you can think, oh, I wish I would have done this better or that better. But the reality of life is we're our own personality, and we can't change that. The only thing we can change is our behavior. So over the years, I go out of my way to have fun with the girls and with my son. We get together and we play Yahtzee and we play King's Corners and we have dinners together and we laugh and we enjoy each other's company. I don't know what else we can do to show them that we love them other than to tell them that, which I do all the time. We never end a conversation without me saying, I love you.
I think our family's the same way. We say a lot of I love yous for sure. You both grew up in a different time in our history and our nation's history. And of course, I did too at this point, but things have changed, as you have already mentioned, Helen, and they're still changing. Talk about what is good about that and maybe a little bit about what bothers you that's going on in our world today.
I think the fact that so many, and I don't want to be preaching to anybody, but just the importance of having Jesus Christ in your life, because that's the solid foundation of any home. And I'm thinking the technology today is good to a point, but now it's overcome people. You can't see kids walking down the street without a phone in their hand, and they're not talking to each other, but they're talking to the phone or playing games on the phone. And I think we're losing the closeness of relationships. And I just don't think that's good. And you can see what's happening in the country now. So we live in a totally different time. Back when Duwayne and I were married, families basically stuck together, and you're not seeing that happen. Not only in the Catholic Church, but any church, the divorce rate is very high, which is very sad because, as it said before, that's the foundation of a healthy society is family. So the technology is good, but it's kind of overtaking people's lives, and that's not good.
Duwayne, you have any additional thoughts to what she just said? I'm sure you agree with that, for sure.
I agree totally, and we talk about it several times, and we see what's happening in the world today, and it's kind of sad. I think it's sad. You have husbands and wives being dominant over each other, trying to be part of the world, and I don't think that's the way to go.
Well, let's change gears and talk about, I'm sure you can come up with something here, to talk about something funny that has happened in your marriage. Well, what is a story that makes you laugh?
Makes you laugh. Well, one of the things that happened when we came to Rapid City, of course, is we started our business on practically nothing. And we made a success of that. And when the kids were out of school, we sold it. And then the bishop of our diocese got a hold of me and said, Duwayne, why don't you start the stewardship program for the diocese? Here I am. I said, well, I know nothing about that. And the deferred giving program set up the foundation for the giving to the diocese. Well, here I am again, something new. So I said, well, with God's help, I can do anything. So I accepted his offer, and for 6 years, I worked for the diocese. I put together the stewardship program, which is the annual appeal that we have every year, and went around the diocese preaching on will seminars, charitable giving to the diocese, things like that. And then I told the bishop I have to go back to work because I want to retire someday. So thank goodness, when I was looking for another job, I used my old company that I worked for in California as a reference. And they called me up and said, Duwayne, if you're looking to go back to work and you're willing to relocate, come and see us. So I did, and that's how I got to Peachtree City. I took a territory there where I covered 8 states in the aerospace industry. We supplied composite materials to the aircraft industry, the missile industry, satellite industry, sporting goods industry. Our company developed the first fiberglass pole vault with Browning.
Oh, wow.
In the 1960s.
Wow.
So we had a lot of fun.
That's Peachtree City, Georgia, that he's talking about. Helen, how about you? Have you got any stories that make you smile when you think of your marriage?
We did everything together and moved together and struggled together, argued together, debated together. So that's what makes me smile. And I think of all of the things that our kids did and the fun things that they did. And I'm thinking it's just an everyday enjoyment of family.
So at 84 years old, when you look back, do you have any regrets in your life?
Oh my goodness. I guess, if I had chosen a career outside of my family, I would have been a business consultant because I like to fix things.
Right.
I go into some of these places and I'm thinking, oh, why don't they do this? And why don't they do that? And I'm thinking I could change this and make it better and grow their business. But I don't really have any regrets, Bruce, really.
How about you, Duwayne? Do you have any regrets?
Well, no, I don't know what I could have done and what I couldn't have done. I've been very fortunate, and the reason I've been fortunate, I read in Psalms that the Lord gives wisdom to the simple. And so I figured I got it made no matter what I do. And I'll tell you how he's taken care of us. Money has never been anything that we were looking forward to. But at 52, when I went to Georgia, We didn't have a dime. I retired at 63.
Wow.
And I've been retired for 26 years. So tell me that the Lord isn't involved in our life.
Wow. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So what are your plans now in the sunset years of your life?
I think we're totally just going to continue to enjoy life together, not to change anything, just keep God in our lives and serve Him the best we can.
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't pray for material things. I just thank God every day for blessings. And Duwayne and I both had a little health issue every once in a while, but we're doing really well at our age. So every morning I get up and I say, thank you, God, for another day. Thank you for every blessing that comes our way, and thank you for my beating heart.
Wow. Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? So
That's the truth. One day at a time, sweet Jesus.
So one of these days, you've got all these grandchildren and great-grandchildren and children, and a lot of these people not even born yet that's going to be coming along, as you know, and they're going to listen to this. So this thing, when it's out here and this thing is streaming, it's accessible from now on, and they're going to be listening to your voice. And that's one of the reasons I do them. The main reason I'm doing these podcasts is to capture your voice, not only for people to listen now and get wisdom from people that's been around a long time and figured a little bit out about life, but it's also a voice for your family that they can say, wow, it's wonderful to hear his voice. It's wonderful to hear her voice. It's the wisdom they have. I can learn from it. And I'm telling you, there's plenty of wisdom in what you've been talking about. So knowing that they're going to be listening to this in the future, what advice do you have for all those number of descendants that you have?
I'm glad you asked me that question, Bruce, because I tell the children now, and I would tell the children in the future, there are two roads you can travel in life. One is the right road, along with God, and one is the wrong road, along with the world. And you better get it right, because you don't have the choice at the end of your life. Take the right road. This is not all there is. So that would be my advice to my kids, and it is today, and it is for the future.
And there are consequences to taking the wrong road, right? Even though you may get back on the right road, there's still consequences for taking the wrong road. How about you, Duwayne?
Well, I'd just like to remind them that God is walking with them at all times. If we're not, we're the ones that walked away. So try to do what's right by walking the right path. It's not easy. There are rules and regulations to doing it right. But if you keep your faith, you can do it. And I thank God every day for my wife, for each of the grandchildren, son-in-laws, daughter-in-laws, great-grandchildren, all our family. We thank God for them and ask His blessings on them every day.
Well, you both have been blessed, and you're also a blessing to others. Just the fact that you're sitting here talking to me, both of you, obviously your mind is sharp as a tack. Physically, you're doing well. You travel, you drive. You certainly have been blessed. There's a lot of people that's a lot younger than you that are not able to do what you're doing. That is for sure. I got one more question. You probably have answered it, but I want to leave it with this. When it's all said and done, what do you want people to remember about you, Duwayne?
Well, I want them to remember that I tried always to walk in God's footsteps and that I was willing to serve others. It's always been something I like to do. I like to give as much as I can to others, help those that are less fortunate, and I'd like them to remember me as somebody who did that.
Well, I think they will. That is for sure. Helen, how about you?
I just want them to know how much I love them and always have, and to forgive me if I've hurt them in any way in our past, and that the love we had for them was always there, always strong, and always will be. And we always pray for them each and every day. I have one story about our daughter Carrie, who went through a bout of cancer that was really serious, and we prayed for her constantly, and she's now in remission. So we keep praising God for that and continued health. So my prayer is always, please God, bless our children, be merciful to those who are most in need. And I know that our kids know that we love them, and we try to do our best. That's the whole crux of the story.
Well, I can tell you, I believe if they were sitting in the audience listening to this conversation, at this point, they would be standing up giving you a standing ovation at how well you did. I believe that. I said I was going to add, that was my last question, but I got to ask one more. When are you coming back to visit us in Georgia?
Oh, my goodness sake. We love Georgia. You've all been so kind, and Victoria and Scott's friends are also wonderful. Georgia's beautiful, and we even think about moving there, but we'll see what the good Lord has in store for us.
Boy, that would be wonderful.
We'll visit again.
Yeah,
we'd love it.
You come back. Have you got any closing thoughts, Duwayne?
Well, Bruce, I'll tell you what. It's been an honor to meet you and Kathy, and the short time that I've got to visit with you, I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed your books. I had a good time while I was there. I had a lot of good laughs, and I appreciate that.
God bless you both, and I want to schedule, let's do this again in 10 years, okay?
Hey, that sounds beautiful. That'll work.
Thank you so much for doing this. You've honored me by taking the time to talk to me today.
Well, you have a blessed day.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you too, Helen. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Right.
God love you.
Bye-bye. Love you both. Bye-bye.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.